Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because, well, we're going to look at the human body in a completely new light. We often hear the human body described as this perfectly tuned, incredibly optimized machine. But if we actually look at the blueprints, it turns out our biology is far from perfect. In fact, it's kind of a glorious mess. I mean, just think about it for a second. If humans really are the absolute pinnacle of biological engineering, why is it so incredibly easy to sprain an ankle just by stepping off a curb? Why do so many of us suffer from lower back pain? And why is human childbirth so famously difficult and honestly dangerous compared to almost any other mammal on Earth? We've all felt these everyday biological frustrations. And let me tell you, the answer to why we have them is absolutely fascinating.
Okay, so let's dive right into this concept called evolutionary tinkering. See, evolution isn't some master engineer sitting at a drafting table with a blank sheet of paper, carefully designing perfect solutions from scratch. Not at all. Instead, evolution works a lot more like a chaotic, opportunistic tinkerer. It takes whatever random structures are already lying around from our ancient ancestors and hastily remodels them to solve brand new problems. So our bodies, they're essentially ongoing, messy renovation projects built right on top of ancient, outdated foundations.
Section 1, starting on the wrong foot. To really see this tinkerer at work, I want you to literally look down at your feet right now. Go ahead. We're going to start our first case study by looking at the incredibly weird engineering of the human lower leg. The human foot has 26 distinct bones, and the ankle alone has 7 bones, all held together by this wildly complicated web of intervening ligaments. That is a massive amount of moving parts just to stand flat on the ground and walk forward. It's way more complex than it needs to be, which is exactly why we're so prone to things like compression fractures, flat-footedness, bunions, and plantar fasciitis. Seriously, why on earth do we have so many small, delicate bones in an area that takes so much pounding? Well, the answer takes us back about 5 million years. We evolved from earlier hominins who lived in trees to evade predators, right? To survive up in the canopy, they needed a flexible, grasping foot. Think of something very much like a chimpanzee's foot today, complete with an opposable big toe and an ankle that's just as flexible as a human wrist. But when our ancestors climbed down from the trees and started walking upright on land, evolution couldn't just magically invent a brand new walking appendage. It had to hastily remodel that flexible grasping hand into a rigid propulsive lever and a shock-absorbing arch. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how glaringly obvious this becomes when we compare our hastily remodeled 5-million-year-old bipedal setup to an animal that's been walking on 2 legs for 230 million years. Yep. I'm talking about the ostrich. Birds had a massive evolutionary head start on bipedalism, and it really shows. If you could design a perfect, totally optimized leg for running upright, it would look a whole lot like the ostrich. This brilliantly illustrates the stark difference between our tinkered biology and actual optimized engineering. While we're clunking around with 26 bones, the ostrich only uses 2 large toes with a single bone in each. The larger toe acts as a spring-loaded shock absorber, and the second is basically just an outrigger for balance. Even more impressive, our human joints are stabilized by energy-consuming muscles, but ostrich joints are stabilized by ligaments, which greatly improves their endurance. The results of all this? A human sprinter might top out around 27 miles per hour, but an ostrich can sustain speeds over 40 miles an hour. They are hyper-efficient running machines, while we're out here basically walking on repurposed primate hands. Section 2. The misunderstood appendix. Now, evolutionary tinkering isn't always a story of flawed compromises. Sometimes the tinkerer gets something incredibly right, and we just completely misunderstand the genius of it. For over a century, the appendix has been famously dismissed as this useless, evolutionary ticking time bomb. Even Charles Darwin himself theorized that the appendix was merely a vestigial, obsolete remnant of a larger digesting structure called a cecum that our extinct ancestors used to digest tough plant matter. For a really long time, the scientific consensus was that the appendix did absolutely nothing for us today, except, occasionally become inflamed and require emergency surgery. But here's the thing. Darwin didn't have access to modern genetics or evolutionary cladistics. Modern researchers have discovered that the appendix has actually been around for at least 80 million years. Furthermore, it didn't just evolve once, it evolved completely independently at least twice, once in Australian marsupials and another time in rodents and primates. Today, it's present in over 70% of primate and rodent groups. Let me tell you, evolution does not independently select for a useless organ across millions of years and multiple species. That just doesn't happen.
This realization caused a massive paradigm shift in evolutionary biology. As Dr. William Parker from Duke University points out, maybe it's time to correct the textbooks. So, if it isn't just a useless remnant, what exactly was the evolutionary tinkerer building all those millions of years ago?
The answer is actually beautiful in its simplicity. The appendix is a highly specialized safe haven for good bacteria. Think of it as a biological bunker. If a severe illness like dysentery or cholera completely flushes out your digestive tract, the good bacteria hiding securely inside the appendix can quickly emerge to repopulate your gut. It is literally a lifesaver in the natural world. As for appendicitis, well, research now suggests it's not a faulty design at all, but rather a byproduct of modern industrial society. Widespread sewer systems and clean drinking water are fantastic, obviously, but they leave our immune systems with way too little work and too much time on their hands. This lack of natural challenge causes our perfectly adapted safe house to get confused and inflamed. So it's not a broken organ, it's just living in the wrong era.
Section 3. The Obstetric Dilemma.
Now let's look at the final and perhaps most profound compromise in the Tinkerer's workshop, the uniquely human challenge of childbirth. You know, the natural birth movement sometimes romanticizes human birth by comparing it to the graceful, easy deliveries of dolphins. But biologically speaking, dolphins and humans are fundamentally different. Dolphins underwent 50 million years of convergent aquatic evolution. They completely traded their terrestrial limbs for fused necks and a simplified, wide, streamlined pelvis that allows for a really straightforward passage. Plus, their young are precocial, meaning they can swim and breathe immediately. Humans, on the other hand, we evolved on land, and our bodies had a completely different set of priorities. So the crucial point here is that humans developed two defining traits: bipedalism, which is walking upright, and encephalization, which is having a really large brain. These two massive evolutionary advantages form the very basis of what scientists call the obstetric dilemma. It is the literal evolutionary clash between walking on two legs and being incredibly smart. Let's see how this builds into a fascinating, frankly duct-taped biological solution. Step 1. Walking upright required our pelvis to change from a simple ring shape into a complex, twisting, funnel-like birth canal. Step 2. At the exact same time in our evolutionary history, genetic and nutritional changes caused fetal brain size to dramatically increase. I'm sure you see the problem here, right? We had a narrowing, twisted exit route and a much larger infant head. The tinkerer had a crisis on its hands. So for step 3, evolution made a massive compromise. It shortened human gestation. Human babies are born earlier and smaller than they otherwise would be, just so they can safely pass through that bony labyrinth. Which leads us to step 4. Because they're born early, human infants are uniquely altricial, meaning they are highly, highly dependent. This forced our ancestors to become highly social, cooperative nurturers. Childbirth and childbearing became a communal effort, which ultimately drove human society, language, and culture forward. Think about that. Our intelligence caused a physical problem, which evolution solved by forcing us to become social. Section 4. Embracing our evolutionary scars. As we pull all of this together, it really changes how you look at the person in the mirror, doesn't it? Our bodies aren't the streamlined, flawless machines we might wish they were. Instead, the human body is a living history book. Every single ache, every vulnerability tells the incredible story of our survival. We walk on a painful, overly complex foot because our ancestors survived by climbing trees. We have a confused, sometimes inflamed appendix because our bodies were built for a dangerous, bacteria-filled world, not the sanitized tap water of modern society. And we experience incredibly complex, difficult childbirth as a direct, absolutely necessary trade-off for the ability to walk upright and the intelligence to understand the universe around us. These aren't just mistakes. They are magnificent, defining biological compromises that make us uniquely human. And the crazy part? The tinkerer hasn't packed up the workshop. Our biology is still adapting, still shifting, and still compromising as the modern world changes around us. So, looking at the incredible, messy, duct-taped masterpiece that is your own body, it leaves me with one final question for you to ponder. If your body is an ongoing renovation project, what do you think evolution is going to tinker with next?